Good morning. Welcome to the April cherry blossom season open meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Madam Secretary, would you please introduce our agenda for today?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning to you, and good morning, Commissioners. I would like to remind everyone, as the FCC prepares to interface for our building reopening next month, to anticipate more in-person public attendance at our meetings, our open meetings. As such, I want to highlight the following. The purpose of the Federal Communications Commission's open meeting is for the Commission to consider the matters that have been duly posted in accordance with the government in the Sunshine Act. As provided in the Commission's rules, members of the public are invited to observe, which includes attending, listening, and taking notes, but does not include participating in the meeting or addressing the Commission. Actions that purposely interfere or attempt to interfere with the commencement or conduct of the meeting or inhibit the audience's ability to observe or listen to the meeting, including attempts by audience members to address the Commission while the meeting is in progress, are not permitted, and any persons engaging in such behavior will be asked to leave the building. Anyone who refuses to leave voluntarily will be escorted from the building. Additionally, documents presented to the chairwoman, commissioners, or staff during the meeting will not become part of the official record of any commission proceeding, nor will they require further action by the commission. If you wish to comment on an ongoing proceeding before the commission, please visit our website for more information. Thank you for your cooperation. For today's meeting, you will hear 5 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a policy statement intended to help guide Commission's decision-making and stakeholder action to promote efficient coexistence between incumbent and new services. The policy statement promotes a balanced and comprehensive approach to spectrum management that holistically considers both transmitter and receiver components of wireless systems. Second, you will consider an order and notice of proposed rulemaking that would take another important step to protect the nation's telecommunications infrastructure from threats in an evolving national security and law enforcement landscape by proposing comprehensive changes to the Commission's rules that allow carriers to provide international telecommunications service pursuant to Section 214 of the Communications Act of 1934 as amended. Third, you will consider a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that would revise rules for spectrum sharing among new satellite broadband constellations. The rule revisions would clarify protection obligations between non-geostationary, satellite orbit, fixed satellite service systems to facilitate the deployment of these next generation systems, including new competitors. Fourth, you will consider a second report and order which would modify its access stimulation rules to close a perceived loophole exploited by opportunistic access stimulating entities to continue to inflate access charges paid by inter-exchange carriers. The order would make this inefficient practice less attractive to arbitrageurs and help prevent inter-exchange carriers' end-user customers from bearing costs for services that they may not even use. Fifth, you will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking that would increase the accessibility, performance, and functionality of wireless emergency alerts, including greater accessibility for people with disabilities and through multilingual alerting. This is your agenda for today. Please note item 4 from the Office of Engineering and Technology titled "In order to make updates to the International Allocation Table to reflect the International Telecommunication Union radio regulations and make other non-substantive editorial revisions and NPRM seeking comment on implementing certain of the remaining radio frequency allocation decisions from the 2015 World Radio Communication Conference, and item 7 from the Media Bureau titled Amendment of Part 73 and 74 of the Commission's Rules to establish rules for digital low-power television and television station translator stations, update of Part 74 of the Communications Rules related to low-power television and television translator stations, as listed in the April 13th Sunshine Notice, have been adopted by the Commission and deleted from today's agenda. The first item, titled Promoting Efficient Use of Spectrum and Opportunities for New Services, Promoting Efficient Use of Spectrum Through Improved Receiver Interference Immunity Performance, will be presented by the Office of Engineering and Technology, and Ron Rapazzi, Chief of the Office, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Appreciate your work. And Mr. Rapazzi, nice to see you in this role. Please proceed.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. OET is pleased to present for your consideration a policy statement that takes a fresh look at the Commission's spectrum management principles with the goal of facilitating new opportunities for use of our nation's valuable spectrum. As spectrum use across the radio frequencies becomes more intensive and services are packed more closely together, the Commission's spectrum management policies must consider potential efficiencies across all aspects of wireless systems, not just looking at the transmitters, but the receivers as well. While the Commission has long relied on rules establishing particular transmitter requirements to promote spectrum efficiency and more intensive use, receiver performance also can significantly affect the Commission's ability to introduce new wireless services. Last year, the Commission issued a notice of inquiry seeking comment on promoting more efficient spectrum use by expressly reorienting the Commission's spectrum management framework to a holistic approach as it balances considerations of both the transmitter and receiver components of different wireless systems when introducing new services. The policy statement before you provides guidance on such an approach as an integral part of several core principles intended to help inform the Commission's spectrum actions as well as stakeholder expectations. Efficient and effective spectrum management will enable innovative spectrum uses that drive economic growth, competition, security, and innovation. Sitting at the table with me are Paul Murray, Associate Chief in OET, who contributed extensively on this item, and Bob Pavlak, Senior Engineer in OET. Bob has dedicated many years of work with the Commission's Technological Advisory Council, which informs this policy statement. Bob will present the item.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. The policy statement before you presents 9 policy principles to help guide Commission decision-making and stakeholder action to promote efficient coexistence among the many radio services and operations that make use of our nation's spectrum. This policy statement is informed by a rich body of technical and policy literature on improving spectrum management, including from the Commission's Technological Advisory Council, the TAC, other government entities, industry, public interest organizations, and commenters in response to the Commission's April 2022 Notice of Inquiry. In particular, the 9 principles draw, with modification, from the TAC's 2015 white paper titled Basic Principles for Assessing Compatibility of New Spectrum Allocations. That paper recommended a set of Commission spectrum management principles to address the roles of transmitter and receiver performance and to establish clear expectations of incumbent services and new spectrum users in an evolving spectrum environment. The 9 principles are organized into 3 general categories. The first category is interference realities. These are principles of basic radio frequency physics that describe the realities of interference that apply to transmitters and receivers in all spectrum-based services. These realities of interference should guide reasonable operational expectations in an increasingly noisy radio frequency environment. The first principle in this category underscores that interference and harmful interference are affected by the characteristics of both transmitters and receivers. Receiver characteristics can be as important as transmitter characteristics in enabling efficient coexistence among the different radio services. The second principle notes that the RF environment is highly variable, whether caused by RF devices or natural sources. While high degrees of interference protection are achievable for services with high mission reliability and sensitivity requirements, zero risk of occasional interference cannot be guaranteed. Finally, service operators and equipment manufacturers should plan not only for interference in the current RF environment, but also an RF environment that can reasonably be expected to change. The second category is shared responsibilities. The principles here concern the good neighbor policies that promote effective coexistence among spectrum users. These three principles address the respective responsibilities concerning transmitters, receivers, and wireless systems. Both transmitters and receivers share responsibilities to reduce the likelihood and impact of interference to and from neighboring operations. Transmitters should be designed to minimize emitted energy outside of their spectrum authorizations, and receivers should be designed to mitigate interference from undesired emissions outside of their frequency assignments. Finally, transmitter and receiver system operators and manufacturers should plan for and design error-tolerant systems using good engineering practices to mitigate degradation from interference. The third category, data-driven regulatory approaches to promote coexistence. This concerns the Commission's and stakeholders' need for relevant information about services' transmitter and receiver operating characteristics, and the need for sufficiently robust and transparent quantitative analyses of interactions between services. And finally, the last principle states that in future rulemakings, the Commission will explore interference limits policies, in particular spectrum bands, to promote efficient coexistence. With this policy statement, the Commission would refresh its spectrum management framework by setting forth principles that holistically consider both transmitter and receiver performance in a balanced and comprehensive approach to advance the efficient and effective use of our nation's spectrum. This, in turn, will facilitate the development and rapid deployment of new services that will benefit the public. Staff recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges solely for technical and conforming edits.
Thank you. We are now going to hear comments from the bench, and we're going to begin with Commissioner Carr.
No, thanks so much. In his 1914 poem, Mending Wall, Robert Frost coined the phrase, "Good fences make good neighbors." And while he was probably talking about protecting one's turf, I think there's a broader lesson there about coexistence that aligns with the policy statement we make today. When we step back and talk about policy, plainly we have to do more with less. At the same time, we need to get more, and that ties into some of the statements we've all made about restoring the FCC's auction authority so we can get more spectrum out there, and then hopefully people will abide by the policy statement when they put that spectrum to use. But when we step back and think about America's leadership in wireless, it really is vital to our geopolitical interests. When we free up spectrum, whether it's licensed or unlicensed, the world takes notice. When we have our representatives going to international standard-setting bodies or going to world radio conferences that are coming up, when we move spectrum out there, when we're the first mover, it puts the wind at the back of everybody that's working for this country and for our allied interests. And to be sure, there are many debates that take place in these contexts where having that wind at our back makes a significant difference, because there are a lot of nations out there that would be more than happy to see U.S. leadership diminished, not just in wireless, but across the board. And they use those opportunities to try to prevail in little mini debates that take place in those contexts. So again, when we sort of step forward, when we free up spectrum, when we have our auction authority, it really strengthens us in these geopolitical settings, and I think it's important. And then once we have that authority, I think these types of policy statements can go a long way. And I think from my perspective, a lot of this has to do with some of the work that Commissioner Symington has been championing on receiver standards, so look forward to his remarks on this. Thanks.
Thank you. Well said. We will now hear from Commissioner Starks, who is proving the wonder of modern communications and coming to us remotely.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Echo those sentiments from my colleagues. Thank you to the staff for their hard work. You know, as I was listening and closely thinking about this item, a couple of key words, you know, coexistence between incumbents and new services, balanced, comprehensive approach to spectrum management. All of these are going to be lodestars for us as we move forward. Very much want to thank Commissioner Symington for helping us think through these complex issues and for his leadership here. Thank you to the chairwoman as well for the policy statement. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge my appreciation for the very kind remarks of my colleagues and, of course, for the incredible work of the staff on this. The policy statement that we plan to adopt today lays out a common sense approach for how the Commission will conduct spectrum management going forward in what is, in my opinion, the only common sense way to do so, by measuring and managing the efficient use of spectrum by both transmitters and receivers. As I've said numerous times, there's much value in getting to a place where conflicts such as the C-band altimeter conflict are headed off at the pass and spectrum allocation and deployment processes become smooth and orderly endeavors, not because the Commission is picking a side, but rather because the Commission is anticipating problems before they arise and guiding the industry in the right direction. This item takes that first step and paves the way for a framework to accomplish this. The principles laid out in the policy statement will enable the FCC to identify potential interference issues in bands adjacent to new commercial spectrum in advance and define clear rights regarding interference protection. Clear rights provide incentives for innovation and collaboration among spectrum users in a way that avoids technical regulatory mandates, which can often be misguided, imprecise, and overly burdensome. Looking forward, I'm eager to see an NPRM where the Commission proposes a procedural framework for implementing these principles on a band-by-band and service-by-service basis. To address the overarching one-size-fits-all and band and service-specific concerns raised in the record of the Notice of Inquiry, this proposal will create procedures to implement what I like to call band-specific performance boundaries or technical parameters, such as out-of-band emissions for transmitters or for receivers and emissions mask. These would be applied to both transmitters and receivers as part of coming up with an overall framework for addressing the band and service that are implicated. These parameters or principles or band-specific performance boundaries, call them what you will, would become part of the FCC standard analysis when considering a new band for commercial use or reallocating a commercial band for a new use. I believe this approach allows for maximum industry feedback and input because the FCC's current process is to seek comment on the service rules for each band through notice and comment rulemaking. This would not change. It would just be expanded to seek comment on parameters applicable to receivers. Band-specific performance boundaries should be technologically agnostic and otherwise governed by the characteristics of the particular spectrum band where applied. They're congruent with a flexible use model and could foster easier spectrum sharing by creating additional efficiencies in a band. Band-specific performance boundaries would establish operational thresholds as part of the service rules that both transmitters and receivers must adhere to in a given band, and any operations falling outside those boundaries would not be protected. This approach addresses commenter concerns while also allowing the FCC to execute on the vision laid out in the policy statement, and I look forward to this next step. I'd like once more to thank the staff at OET for their diligent work on this seminal item that I'm very happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Wireless spectrum is a scarce resource, but when we put this limited resource to creative use, we can expand communications for all, foster innovation, and support our economic and national security. And our history is full of examples of us doing just that. It's why in the United States, our spectrum policies have long led the wireless world. After all, it was nearly 3 decades ago that the Federal Communications Commission took the academic ideas of Ronald Coase and ushered in a whole new world of spectrum auctions, something that we need to return to, and my colleagues and I together wrote Congress about just this week. We also pioneered the use of unlicensed spectrum, the airwaves we now know and use every day as Wi-Fi, and more recently, we blazed a trail for two-sided incentive auctions and dynamic spectrum sharing. And with each of these efforts, we took spectrum scarcity and turned it into abundance. We need to do it again. Today, more and more of our civic and commercial life relies on wireless technologies. It's unlike anything we've seen before. And commercial spectrum bands are increasingly crowded. This congestion is making it harder to make room in our skies for new technologies and new services. But we have to find a way, because no one wants opportunity and innovation to grind to a halt. We need smarter policies, policies that promote more efficient use of this scarce resource. Sometimes I call this the abundance agenda. That's why 1 year ago, almost to the day, we launched our inquiry into wireless receiver standards. We did this because we recognize that to date, most discussions of spectrum efficiency have been a one-way effort. They focus almost exclusively on transmitters. To avoid harmful interference, we typically have rules about how and when transmitters can operate. But the thing is, wireless communications involves transmitters and receivers. It's a two-way proposition. Both are vital. Both matter. So today, we begin to rethink our approach to spectrum policy and move beyond transmitters to consider receivers too. That's because receivers that are not sufficiently resilient can make it a lot more difficult to introduce additional services in the same or adjacent airwaves. They can diminish the spectral environment and shut out new uses before they even begin. There is too little in our existing spectrum policies that recognizes this fundamental truth. And that's where today's policy statement comes in, drawing on the work of the Commission's Technological Advisory Council, or as we call it around here, the TAC. This policy statement sets up 9 principles to provide guidance on how we will approach questions of spectrum management going forward. These principles are based on a recognition of the physical realities of interference, an expectation that responsibility for spectrum coexistence is shared on both sides of a communication system, and a firm belief in data-driven policymaking. At the same time, this policy statement recognizes that there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to spectrum management, and different systems and different use cases may have different needs. But this policy statement identifies a framework the Commission will seek to apply as we strive for greater efficiency and effectiveness in increasingly congested spectrum. Finally, this is just a first step. We're going to continue to review the record that came in response to last year's inquiry. We're going to learn from our experience under this policy statement, and we'll take a look at further actions to once again turn spectrum scarcity into abundance. I look forward to making progress. And I really want to thank Commissioner Symington for his enthusiasm and work on this subject. I also want to thank the many staff who worked on this effort, including Edwin Brazo, Damian Ariza, Bodman Badapur, Martin Doskat, David Duarte, Miguel Gallegos, Michael Ha, Syed Hassan, Ira Keltz, Matthew Miller, Paul Murray, Nick Orris, Bob Pavlak, Siobhan Philemon, Ron Rapazi, Anika Tashin, and Sean Yun of the Office of Engineering and Technology. Baron Chan, Tom Derenge, Madeline Mayer, Roger Noel, Blaise Cinto, Aparna Sura, Joel Taubenblatt, Jennifer Tomchin, Mary Claire York, and Janet Young of the Wireless Bureau, Jim Schlichting of the International Bureau, Zenji Nakahawa of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Jonathan Campbell, Evan Quirrell, Paul LaFontaine, Cher Lee, Kate Mattraves, Julia McHenry, Mark Montano, Don Stockdale, and Alex Yankovich of the Office of Economics and Analytics, and Deborah Broderson, Doug Klein, and Bill Richardson of the Office of General Counsel. And with that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approved.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, can you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Review of International Section 214 Authorizations to Assess Evolving Risks, and will be presented by the Office of International Affairs. Ethan Lucarelli, Chief of the Office, will give the introduction.
Mr. Lucarelli, it is nice to see you in this role. All right, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning, and good morning, Commissioners. This order and notice of proposed rulemaking would take another important step towards protecting the nation's telecommunications infrastructure from threats in an evolving national security and law enforcement landscape. A company seeking to offer international services originating or terminating in the United States must first obtain an international Section 214 authorization. As part of this process, the Commission relies on the Committee for Assessment of Foreign Participation in the United States Telecommunications Services Sector, more commonly known as Team Telecom, to assess national security and law enforcement risks. However, once an authorization is granted, the Commission has had no set process for periodic review to monitor evolving risks. As a result, the Commission has incomplete and outdated information regarding international Section 214 authorization holders. Today's item, based in part on a 2020 report of the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, proposes to strengthen the Commission's oversight of international Section 214 authorizations to ensure that a carrier's authorization continues to serve the public interest. I would like to thank the many staff from the Commission, including the Office of International Affairs, Office of General Counsel, Office of Economics and Analytics, Media Bureau, Wireless Bureau, Wireline Bureau, Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Enforcement Bureau, and the Office of Communication Business Opportunities for their collaborative work on this complex item. With me today at the table from OIA are Tom Sullivan, Deputy Office Chief, Kate Collins, Assistant Office Chief, Denise Coca, Chief of the Telecommunications Analysis Division, Gabrielle Kim, Senior Attorney Advisor in the Division, and Svantia Swider, Attorney Advisor in the Division. We are also joined by Jim Schlichting, Deputy Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, who, as a deputy in the International Bureau, was instrumental in bringing this item forward. Svantia will present the item.
Good morning, Chairwoman Rosenworcel and Commissioners. As set out in the order and notice of proposed rulemaking before you, the overarching objective of this proceeding is to adopt rules and procedures that will enable the Commission, in close collaboration with relevant executive branch agencies, to better protect telecommunications services and infrastructure in the United States in light of evolving national security, law enforcement, foreign policy, and trade policy risks. The order would adopt a one-time collection of foreign ownership information from international Section 214 authorization holders. The notice proposes rules that would require carriers to renew every 10 years their international Section 214 authority. In the alternative, the notice seeks comment on adopting rules that would require all international Section 214 authorization holders to periodically update information enabling the Commission to review the public interest and national security implications of those authorizations based on that updated information. Through these proposals, the notice seeks to ensure that the Commission is exercising appropriate oversight of international Section 214 authorization holders to safeguard U.S. telecommunications networks, to establish an effective and expeditious process for the renewal or, in the alternative, periodic review of international Section 214 authorizations. The notice proposes and seeks comment on the following issues: establishing a system of priorities for renewal applications according to the existence and nature of reportable foreign ownership and the likelihood that the applications will raise national security, law enforcement, foreign policy, and/or trade policy concerns. Adopting streamlined and simplified procedures for renewal applications that do not have reportable foreign ownership. Applying to renewal applications the same rules applicable to initial applications for international Section 214 authority, and thus harmonizing the application requirements. To continue to address evolving national security, law enforcement, foreign policy, and/or trade risks, the notice proposes or seeks comment on other improvements to the Commission's rules applicable to applications for international Section 214 authority and modification, assignment, transfer of control, and renewal of international Section 214 authority. The notice seeks comment on whether to adopt a new ownership reporting threshold that would require disclosure of 5% or greater direct and indirect equity and/or voting interests. The notice proposes to adopt rules requiring applicants to provide information about their current and/or expected future services and geographic markets. The notice proposes to require all applicants to provide information on foreign-owned managed network service providers. The notice proposes to require applicants to identify the facilities that they use to provide services from the United States into Canada and/or Mexico, and to provide updated information on a periodic basis. The notice proposes to require applicants to certify that they will undertake to implement and adhere to baseline cybersecurity standards based on recognized standards. The notice proposes to require applicants to certify in their application whether they use equipment or services identified in the Commission's covered list of equipment and services deemed to pose an unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. To further ensure that carriers' use of their international Section 214 authority is consistent with the public interest and that the public and the Commission are appropriately informed about the activities of authorization holders, the notice proposes and seeks comment on additional modifications to Part 1 and 63 rules. The Office of International Affairs recommends adoption of the order and notice and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks. 4 years ago, the FCC took the then unprecedented step of blocking a wireless carrier that was owned and controlled by the communist regime in China from connecting to our networks. That action was entirely justified by the record and by China's evolving efforts to use entities it controls to surveil persons within our borders, steal intellectual property, and engage in other nefarious acts. Back then, in 2019, I called for us to do a top-to-bottom review of every entity that holds an authorization and can present a potential threat. And we've done that in a number of cases now in the 214 context. And today's decision is going to make sure that we have all of the information we need to continue those types of efforts. Oftentimes we issue 214s or other authorizations, and they can sit there for a long period of time, notwithstanding the fact that a lot can change with international relations, with geopolitics, with threats during that period of time. So I want to thank the chairwoman in particular for her thoughtful approach of taking a look at how we can get the right information to make sure that our decisions about security threats and public interest determinations stay up to date. So I support the item, and thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The growth and importance of international telecommunications cannot be overstated. Our seas are crisscrossed with subsea cables sharing data and information among nations throughout the world. This growth, particularly in U.S. international telecommunication services, has led to tangible benefits for the United States and its people. But consistent with that security landscape is an increased threat profile. Just last week, I wrote an op-ed with Senator Peters talking about the need for us to secure our domestic rip and replace. But here we focus on our international 214 authorizations. And it's the right balance that we strike here today. First, it's overdue for the Commission to update our records regarding international 214 authorization holders, I believe. Second, we absolutely should be considering either a renewal or a periodic review process for these authorizations, consistent with our rules for other Commission licenses. As national security officials would say, we must ensure that we control the haystack. We've got to be on top of the data. Third, I strongly believe, consistent with my past efforts to require similar cybersecurity and risk management baseline requirements for providers in the USF and emergency alert participants, requiring a baseline cybersecurity system requirement for all providers is important. Fourth, we already require providers of advanced communication services to report on whether they have purchased, rented, leased, or otherwise obtained communications equipment or services listed on our covered list. And there's no reason why applicants seeking to provide international services should not have to identify whether or not they do the same. And last, I'd like to highlight here, we propose to collect cross-border facilities and information. This would lead to a much more complete understanding of the infrastructure that reaches our soil, as well as the related issues that I have frequently spoken about, including data centers and other services that allow access to U.S. communications and the personal information potentially of American citizens. So I look forward to reviewing the record that develops and continuing to engage with stakeholders to ensure that any rules find the proper balance between protecting our infrastructure and supporting continued growth and innovation. I'm particularly heartened to see that Department of Justice, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security all strongly support the FCC's effort. And it's important that we continue to work with our government partners here to mitigate any risks that arise from international 214 authorizations. I'm confident that we'll do so today. Thank you to the staff. As I have done in the past, I'd like to congratulate Ms. Swider there, who is a former intern of my office. You are doing extraordinary work and truly helping to protect Americans. Keep up the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Starks. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. Foreign adversaries must not be allowed to control our country's telecommunications infrastructure. So I'm happy to support this item, which explores how to best equip the federal government with the information it needs to make sure that the flow of telecommunications in and out of our country is secure. At the same time, openness to foreign investment is a major strength of the American economy and a policy that the United States has long sought to encourage in other countries as well. Well-intentioned but overzealous rules can inhibit foreign investment while not providing any meaningful gains in security. It's important to get this right, so I want to thank the chairwoman and my colleagues on the commission for working with me to make sure that this item asks the right questions about how we can accomplish these important national security goals without unnecessarily burdening investment. And I'm hopeful that a robust record will help us choose the right course of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. The first duty of the public servant is public safety. And at the Federal Communications Commission, that means we have an obligation to help ensure the safety of our nation's communications networks. This responsibility never ends because the threats to network security are always evolving. It is vitally important that the agency's policies keep pace. Now that sounds simple, but in practice it is not always easy. This is especially true when it comes to licensing, where historically our practice has been to freeze national security and law enforcement assessments on the very day that a license is granted. Now, nearly 3 years ago, the United States Senate Subcommittee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, that's a mouthful, released a report on threats to the United States networks from foreign government-owned carriers. In it, they highlighted how the grant of authority to operate international communications in the United States is typically a one-and-done activity. In other words, once a commission license is granted, little is done to revisit the authority and safeguard our networks against evolving threats over time. Today, there is nothing in our rules that requires the Commission to generally reassess a foreign carrier's authorization to provide service. This is in stark contrast to other authorizations granted by the agency that have to be considered on a periodic basis. That is why the subcommittee recommended requiring some form of regular review of Section 214 authorizations to account for evolving national security risks. This was a good idea then, and it's a good idea now. So today we launch a rulemaking to explore this concept along with other improvements to our Section 214 rules. I believe we can modernize our process to address these concerns while ensuring that we honor the expectations of Section 214 license holders so that the United States remains a safe and attractive place to do business. This rulemaking sets us on that path. Now, this is just the latest step in our comprehensive approach to addressing network security in a modern way. It is fundamentally a strategy to deter, defend, and develop. That means deterring bad actors, defending against untrusted vendors, and developing a market for trustworthy innovation. By doing this, we are working to help improve communications security at home and shine as an example for the rest of the world. That's why it's fitting that this is the first effort from our newly established Office of International Affairs. All right, I want to thank those who worked on this rulemaking, and anything involves network security involves a lot of people, so get comfortable. That includes Denise Coca, Kate Collins, Galia Esteyech, Francis Gutierrez, Desiree Hansen, Karen Johnson, Gabrielle Kim, David Kretsch, Arthur Lechtman, Ron Marcella, Sumita Mulculty, Catherine O'Brien, Tom Sullivan, Svante Swider, and Michelle Wu Bailey from the Office of International Affairs, Adrian McNeil and Troy Tanner from the Space Bureau, Justin Kane, Kenneth Carlberg, Sean Cochran, Michael Connolly, Kurian Jacob, Deb Jordan, Lauren Kravitz, Haley Laws, Nicole McGinnis, Senji Nakahara, Erica Olson, Austin Randazzo, Jim Schlichting, Chris Smeek, and James Wiley from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. Pam Arlick, Matthew Baker, Michelle Burlove, Elizabeth Drugula, Jody Griffin, Trent Harkrader, Heather Hendrickson, Melissa Droller-Kirkle, Jody May, Jordan Marie Roth, Rodney McDonald, Connor O'Donovan, and Terry Natoli from the Wireline Competition Bureau, Kim Cook, Hunter Deely, Loyan Igal, Georgina Fagan, Pamela Gallant, Pam Kane, Kaloon Lee, Jeremy Marcus, Ryan McDonnell, and Victoria Randazzo from the Enforcement Bureau, Andrew Manley, Alexander Sangenis, and Holly Sauer from the Media Bureau, Gannett Hanley, Carrie Hicks, Ethan Jeans, Joyce Jones, Paul Malamud, Roger Noel, Thomas Reed, Jennifer Salhas, Blair Cinto, and Joel Taubenblatt for the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Peter Alexander, Chelsea Fallon, Catherine Mattraves, Julia McHenry, Steve Rosenberg, Donald Stockdale, Emily Talaga, and Alex Yankovich from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Regina Brown and Roland Helgevin of the Office of Managing Director, Cara Grayer and Joy Ragsdale of the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, and Jim Bird, Sarah Citron, Matthew Dunn, Michelle Ellison, Andrea Kearney, Andrea Kelly, Doug Klein, David Konskal, Jacob Lewis, Marcus Mayer, Wissam Noom, Scott Novak, Bill Richardson, Joel Rabinowitz, Roy Sherlock, and Jeffrey Steinberg and Elliot Tarloff from the Office of General Counsel. It's a lot of people. We're going to proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Facilitating Satellite Broadband Competition and will be presented by the Space Bureau. And Julie Carney, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. Carney, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. I'm honored to be here today to introduce the newly launched Space Bureau's very first item to be considered at a commission meeting. Today, the Space Bureau will present for your consideration a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that updates and clarifies coordination and sharing procedures to facilitate sharing among non-geostationary orbit fixed satellite service systems approved in different processing rounds. This report and order and further notice, if adopted, will support the Commission's efforts to promote development and competition in broadband NGSO satellite services that are proliferating in this new space age. Joining me at the table are, from the Space Bureau, are Troy Tanner, Deputy Bureau Chief, Janine Poltronieri, Deputy Chief of the Satellite Programs and Policy Division, and Stephanie Neville, Attorney Advisor in the Satellite Programs and Policy Division. I also offer the Bureau's thanks to our colleagues in the Enforcement Bureau, the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Office of the General Counsel, and the Office of International Affairs for their assistance with this draft. Stephanie Neville will present the item, and in keeping with this day of firsts, this is Stephanie's first presentation at a commission meeting. And now to Stephanie.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. Good morning, Commissioners. This order and further notice of proposed rulemaking would continue Commission efforts to facilitate service from a new generation of broadband satellite constellations. The item revises the spectrum sharing rules for non-geostationary satellite orbit fixed satellite service, or NGSO FSS systems, to encourage competition and provide greater regulatory certainty. Over the past 5 years, the Commission has received an unprecedented number of satellite license applications for NGSO FSS systems. Constellations of these satellites in low Earth orbit can provide broadband services with lower latency and broader coverage than was previously available via satellite. In 2017, the Commission updated its licensing rules for NGSO FSS systems. The Space Bureau, formerly known as the International Bureau, has also initiated several processing rounds for NGSO FSS system applications in which timely filed applications are considered together on an equal basis. In 2021, the Commission issued a notice of proposed rulemaking seeking comment on rule changes that would clarify the relative obligations between NGSO FSS systems approved in different processing rounds. This item would adopt the following proposals. First, the order would limit the default spectrum splitting procedure to NGSO FSS systems approved in the same processing round before sunsetting. Second, the order would require NGSO FSS systems approved in a later processing round to coordinate with or demonstrate they will protect earlier round systems. Third, the order would require all NGSO FSS grantees to coordinate with each other in good faith. Fourth, for inter-round sharing, the order would require later round systems to coordinate with earlier round systems and submit an interference analysis demonstrating that they will protect earlier round systems in the event that an earlier and a later round system do not reach a coordination agreement. And fifth, the order would adopt a sunsetting provision that entitles NGSO FSS systems to protection from systems approved in a subsequent processing round until 10 years after the first authorization or market access grant in that subsequent processing round. In addition, the order would address conflicting views concerning good faith coordination and information sharing as part of good faith coordination. The order would also apply the rule changes adopted in this report and order to all current NGSO FSS licensees and market access grantees, as well as pending and future applicants and petitioners. The further notice of proposed rulemaking would seek comments on the appropriate values and assumptions to be used in the degraded throughput methodology and whether we should adopt a rule limiting aggregate interference from later rounds NGSO FSS systems into earlier round systems. Additionally, we seek comments on what criteria should be applied among NGSO systems after the sunset period. In order to facilitate the deployment of NGSO FSS systems capable of providing broadband and other services on a global basis, and to promote competition among NGSO FSS systems proponents, including the market entry of new competitors, the Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now hear comments from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Well, thank you so much to the new FCC Space Force on your first presentation. Great to see you, Julie, stepping in as the chief of that. Really look forward to all the great work that you all are doing. And obviously, we didn't need any more sort of timely reminder of the importance of space than about 2,000 miles from here down in Boca Chica, Texas this morning. The biggest, most powerful rocket ever built took off and had some success for a long time there. Ultimately, it was a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. I'm not an engineer. I think that means it blew up.
That sounds like a euphemism, yeah.
Yeah, I think it blew up. It blew up, safe to say. But nonetheless, there was a tremendous amount of lessons learned, obviously a lot of learning that took place. I am very, very confident that in a short time, we'll see an even more successful launch there. But as we see all of this great activity, we got to get our approaches right to make sure that we can have competition up there in the stars. And so I think we do that today. We create the right incentive structure, propose to create the right incentive structure so that the competitors can work this out and consumers ultimately can benefit from that. So thanks to the team for all your hard work on this. It has my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. One thing is for sure, when you're talking about spectrum sharing between NGSO systems, much is at stake, and successful coordination could be the difference between expanding broadband's reach to the hardest locations to serve in the U.S. and, or delaying service and choice to those on the wrong side of the digital divide. It could be the difference between maintaining our pole position in global space economy or handing the lead to our economic and geopolitical rivals. And it could be the difference between finding an economically sustainable path for massive space investments or watching them fizzle. Then we turn to the issue of security, and that is another mission critical part here. That could be the difference between keeping our military and allies online and connected or having their communications go dark when our collective security depends on access. And so we're reaching the right result. As challenging as it is here today, we're being asked to strike that delicate balance. It kept coming in my mind between the stability and security on the one hand, and also accommodating serial innovation in a truly dynamic industry. There are a number of policy levers that we're pulling at here, What's the right sharing methodology? What's the right protection level under that methodology? What's the right effective period for protection? How should sharing work after it expires? What operators can and can't do while still demonstrating how they can share an existing system? All of these are multifactorial issues here, and we have, I believe, reached the right result. Just look how it wasn't easy. The number of filings that we've just had, the flurry just in the last couple of weeks was a lot for us all to get through. Finally, I'd be remiss, as was mentioned, if I didn't thank the International Bureau for a fantastic closing performance, and of course to Julie and the newly launched Space Bureau here. Thank you for joining the team here, and look forward to continuing work here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I support today's item, and I'm happy to see the agency continuing to move forward with modernizing the FCC's rules, including the agency organization itself, in harmony with satellite industry changes. No market telecom sector is changing as rapidly as the satellite sector, specifically the NGSO fixed satellite service market. This item takes careful steps to incrementally change our rules while also seeking comment on how to address the thornier issues related to interference protection and the like. This proceeding also addresses many of the problems Congress is working to resolve, as evidenced by the swift progression of the SAT Streamlining Act. But there is more work to come. I look forward to working with Congress and my commission colleagues on these matters going forward. Thank you to the staff of the Space Bureau for a great item and a great launch.
Thank you, Commissioners. When I announced my plan to reorganize the Federal Communications Commission and establish a new Space Bureau, I said it was about ensuring that our policies keep up with the incredible pace of activity in the space sector. I said that in light of this activity, we needed to identify how our existing frameworks may need to be re-examined and updated. After all, you cannot just keep doing things the old way and expect to thrive in the new. Today's effort is a testament to this proposition. We adopt a new framework for spectrum sharing among non-geostationary fixed satellite service systems that promotes efficiency, competition, and innovation, and all three are essential for the growing space economy. It has long been the practice of the Commission to license these satellite constellations in processing rounds. In practice, this means that satellite systems that got their applications in early during the same round have equal rights to shared spectrum in the band. But for applications that come in later, it is a different story. They have to protect these earlier systems in the earlier round, and those systems get a first mover advantage. Now, this can be a good thing because it provides early entrants with the certainty needed for costly and complex satellite deployments. But the downside is that when this first mover advantage continues in perpetuity, it shuts out would-be competitors, prevents newer deployments, and discourages operators from transitioning to more efficient systems that are better suited to sharing. That's a not so good thing. So today we update this process. We adopt a sunset on this spectrum priority that kicks in 10 years after a later round system is authorized. Now the first movers will enjoy the advantage they've earned by daring to think big and take on that risk, but they won't be able to hold on to that regulatory privilege forever. This will open our skies to more competition. We also adopt rules that bring more certainty to the rights and obligations of systems within a processing round and among different processing rounds. Under our old framework, there was an incentive to refuse to coordinate with your competitor and block them from entering the marketplace. Today we fix that. We clarify that it is the responsibility of all parties to coordinate in good faith and to exchange the information with each other that is necessary to ensure the shared spectrum resources used by satellite systems can accommodate new innovation and new ideas. These updates are smart and modern. They reward early investment, but also help clear the way for new entrants. They promote spectrum efficiency and open up possibilities for new innovation without regard to the date of system authorization. I am proud to have this first effort presented for vote by the new Space Bureau. Congratulations to Julie, the chief of the new Space Bureau, and of course to her team. Thank you also to the International Bureau who worked on this. There is a lot more to do coming up, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you to make it happen. Thank you to the agency staff who are responsible for this important rulemaking, including Clay DeSalle, Jennifer Gilson and Julie Kearney, Carl Kensinger, Adrian McNeil, Catherine Medley, Carrie Murray, Stephanie Nelville, Janine Polinatreri, Sankar Perswar, Troy Tanner, and Marissa Velez of the Space Bureau, Michael Karowitz, Kimberly Cook, Matthew Gibson, Jason Kolofsky, Shannon Lipp, Jeremy Marcus, Ryan McDonald, Janet Moran, Elizabeth Muma, Victoria Randazzo, and Dedrick Roykabrisky of the Enforcement Bureau. Paul LaFontaine, Katrin Montraves, Julia McHenry, Michelle Schaefer, and Alex Yankovich from the Office of Economics and Analytics, Tom Sullivan from the Office of International Affairs, David Konskell and Bill Richardson from the Office of General Counsel, and Kara Grayer and Joy Ragsdale from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. And with that, we will proceed to a vote. Commissioner Carr?
Approve.
Commissioner Starks?
Approve.
Commissioner Symington?
Approve.
The chair votes aye. This item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Updating the Intercarrier Compensation Regime to Eliminate Access Arbitrage, and it will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau, and Trent Harkrader, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Harkrader, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today, the Wireline Competition Bureau presents for your consideration a second report in order that, if adopted, gives the Commission the tools to fight ongoing access stimulation schemes that exploit the intercarrier compensation system and raise the cost of service for long-distance carriers and their customers. The item was developed by the Bureau with input from the Office of Economics and Analytics, the Office of General Counsel, and the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Bureau's Pricing Policy Division for their incredible work on this item. Up here with me are Lynn Inkeldow, the Deputy Chief in that division, Gil Strobel, the Chief of that division, and Marv Sachs, an Attorney Advisor, who will present the item. Marv, over to you.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. This second report in order, if adopted, would implement many of the rule modifications that the Commission proposed in the July 2022 access arbitrage further notice of proposed rulemaking. These rule changes are aimed at curbing access stimulation schemes that have arisen since the Commission adopted the 2019 access arbitrage order and the accompanying rules. In adopting the 2019 order and rules, the Commission sought to eliminate access stimulation arbitrage by local exchange carriers, or LECs, that partner with providers of high-volume calling services, such as free conference calling services and chat lines, to artificially drive up the number of long-distance calls that the LECs deliver to end users, so the LECs can maximize charges to the long-distance company for delivering the inflated number of calls. The charges that LECs impose on long-distance companies, which are also called inter-exchange carriers or IXCs, for delivering such access stimulation traffic are ultimately paid by the IXC's customers, most of whom do not use the high-volume calling services that generate the vast majority of the terminating traffic. The existing access stimulation rules address this issue by prohibiting LECs and intermediate access providers that provide switching and transport services from imposing certain tariffed access charges on IXCs when the LEC delivers the access stimulation traffic to end users. After the 2019 rules became effective, some LECs sought to evade those rules by inserting an Internet Protocol-enabled service provider, or IPES provider, into the call path between the local exchange carrier, or intermediate access provider, and the provider of the high-volume calling services. The LEC then claimed that the access stimulation rules did not apply because there was no local exchange carrier serving end users in the call path. As a result, the intermediate access provider continued to impose tariff charges on the IXCs for terminating those calls, and the access stimulating LEC avoided financial responsibility for those charges, the exact practice that the Commission found to be unjust and unreasonable in 2019. If adopted, the second report in order would close this perceived loophole in the existing access stimulation rules by extending the application of these rules to traffic that terminates through IPES providers. These providers would be required to calculate the ratio of their terminating and originating call volumes, just as LECs are already required to do. And as is already the case with LECs, if the ratio meets or exceeds the triggers established in the existing access stimulation rules, the IPES provider would be deemed to be engaged in access stimulation. The new and revised rules would establish a bright line methodology for calculating the traffic ratios for both LECs and IPES providers. LECs and IPES providers would count all calls that go through each end office or equivalent to and from any telephone number associated with the operating company number that identifies the LEC or IPES provider. Under these rules, IPES providers would count all calls made to and from telephone numbers they receive directly from a numbering administrator. Similarly, LECs would count calls to and from telephone numbers associated with their operating company number, including any phone numbers they might indirectly assign to an IPES provider. If an IPES provider engages in access stimulation, the intermediate access provider would be prohibited from collecting tariff-terminating switching and transport charges from an IXC for traffic bound to the access-stimulating IPES provider or its customers. The intermediate access provider could, however, collect its tariff charges from the IPES provider or its LEC partner. The item would also add a definition of IPES provider that would apply only in the context of the access stimulation rules. And in addition, the item would add a definition of end office equivalent to the rules to ensure that the rules apply even to IPES providers that do not have a traditional end office. Overall, this item strengthens the ability of the Commission to guard against unlawful access stimulation arbitrage that harms consumers. The Bureau recommends adoption of the second report in order and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the bench. Commissioner Carr.
Thanks so much. I think the golden rule of regulation is if there's a rule, there will be arbitrage, or at least attempts at arbitrage. And when people identify or exploit loopholes, it's important that we be diligent in addressing that. And so thanks so much to the team for doing that. In this particular incident, I support the work that you've been doing, and the item has my vote. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This also has my support. We continue to work to close the loopholes here in access stimulation, and it's going to continue to be something that we're going to continue to focus on until we get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. In addition to supporting my colleagues' remarks, I would note that when reading through this item, I started to get a headache very quickly. I want to express my appreciation to everyone who has struggled with the complexities of this, and it's not always the most recognized work, so I want to recognize it. It seems like you whack one of these down, another just pops up in its place. We'll just have to keep whacking. Nothing further except to thank everyone who worked on it.
All right. So true. Thank you, commissioners. For decades, a Byzantine system of hidden subsidies helped keep prices down and phone service available for consumers in rural areas. But its complexity also created opportunities for gaming the system. In 1996, Congress passed the Telecommunications Act and directed this agency to update the system. That meant making once implicit subsidies explicit, moving to a bill and keep regime where carriers' own customers supported networks, and supporting carriers in expensive and hard-to-serve rural areas with the Universal Service High-Cost Program. If that sounds complicated, well, it is, because the agency has been hard at work on that task ever since. More headaches than we can probably count. But we've come a long way, and there are still some entities determined to exploit the system. In particular, some companies artificially pump phone traffic to remote locations where they get extra fees for terminating calls. And now that we have identified this loophole, we need to shut it down, and that's exactly what we do here. As complex as this is, our goal is simple: to make the system fairer and more efficient for everyone who pays a phone bill. So thank you to the staff responsible for this effort, including Susan Barr, Allison Baker, Ahuva Batams, Kaylee Coker, Lynn Engeldow, Trent Harkrader, Heather Hendrickson, Edward Kratchmer, Albert Lewis, Jody May, Michael Nemchik, Jordan Marie Reth, Marvin Sachs, Michelle Slater, Gil Strobel, and Raphael Snader from the Wireline Competition Bureau. Stacy Jordan, Eugene Kiselev, Richard Kwiatkowski, Julia McHenry, Eric Ralph, Michelle Schaefer, and Shane Taylor from the Office of Economics and Analytics. James Carr, Sarah Citron, Michelle Ellison, Andrea Kearney, Richard Mallon, William Richardson, William Schur, Jeffrey Steinberg, and Derek Yeo from the Office of General Counsel, Anthony De Laurentiis, Loyan Egal, Lisa Griffith, and Rosemary McHenry from the Enforcement Bureau, and Kara Greer and Joy Ragsdale from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities. We will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr.
Approve.
Commissioner Starks. I saw him mouth approve. Is that can you just put your microphone on?
Oh, my microphone is on.
We can hear you now.
So I'm not, oh, yeah. I said approve, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And now, Madam Secretary, can we proceed to the next item?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, item 5 on your agenda is titled Improving Wireless Emergency Alerts and will be presented by the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and Deborah Jordan, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan, please proceed.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners. Today we present a further notice of proposed rulemaking designed to improve the accessibility and performance of wireless emergency alerts, which notify the public about emergencies on their mobile devices. Emergency managers across the country rely on this public safety tool to protect their communities during disasters, to help recover missing children, and to convey other life-saving information. For wireless emergency alerts to remain effective, the public must be able to understand the alerts they receive, and emergency managers must maintain confidence in the performance of this tool. While wireless emergency alerts are a valuable resource, stakeholders in the system must be vigilant and proactive to ensure it remains so. We must also leverage advancements in technology to promote the accessibility of wireless emergency alerts. For example, one area of enhancement is multilingual alerting. The Commission previously adopted rules to support wireless emergency alerts in a second language, Spanish, but more can be done. To that end, the further notice before you would strengthen the language capabilities of wireless emergency alerts, improve functionality, provide emergency managers and the public with more control over the presentation of the alert signal, and establish a database to promote transparency about the availability of wireless emergency alerts and benchmark its performance. Now to present today's item, with me today from the Public Safety Homeland Security Bureau are Austin Randazzo, Associate Chief of the Bureau, James Wiley, Deputy Chief of the Bureau's Cybersecurity and Communications Reliability Division, and Michael Antonino, an Attorney Advisor in that division. I would like to thank the Bureau staff who worked on this item, as well as other bureaus and offices that contributed. And now to Mr. Antonino, who will present the item.
Thank you, Chief Jordan. Good morning, Chairwoman Rosenworcel and Commissioners. Today's further notice of proposed rulemaking seeks comment on ways to improve the accessibility and performance of wireless emergency alerts, also called WEA. First, the further notice proposes to require participating wireless providers to ensure that their subscribers' WEA-capable mobile devices have the capacity to translate English language alert messages that they receive into the 13 most commonly spoken languages in the United States by taking advantage of machine translation technologies. We seek comment on whether and how WEA might be improved to provide support for American Sign Language and text-to-speech. Second, the further notice proposes to require participating wireless providers to support the transmission of thumbnail-sized images and location-aware maps for inclusion in WEA messages. We also seek comment on whether WEA messages should support the inclusion of infographics and a set of hazard symbols designed for emergency communications. Third, to improve emergency managers' flexibility to tailor alerts to their specific needs. The further notice proposes to require participating wireless providers to provide emergency managers with the ability to send alerts without triggering the WIA attention signal. We seek comment on how to strike the right balance for individuals with disabilities that may require some kind of vibration signal or audio signal from their devices to notify them of when they have received an alert message. Fourth, to reduce consumer opt-out, the further notice proposes to require participating wireless providers to provide consumers with the option to receive WIA messages without the associated attention signal or vibration cadence. Fifth, the further notice seeks to facilitate more effective WIA public awareness exercises by enabling emergency managers to send 2 tests alerts per year that the public receives by default. Sixth, the further notice proposes to establish minimum WIA performance requirements for reliability, speed, and accuracy. We seek comment on what these performance minimums should be. Finally, the further notice proposes to create a WIA database and require participating wireless providers to populate it with WIA availability and performance information. We propose to require wireless providers to submit a representation of their geographic service area and an account of the WIA-capable mobile devices that they sell. We also propose to require them to submit data to the Commission's WIA database regarding WIA's availability, reliability, accuracy, and speed. We seek comment on the specific data to be submitted and the source from which the data should be derived. We also seek comment on any alternative approaches to WIA performance reporting. The Bureau recommends adoption of this further notice and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before we hear comments from the bench, I want to welcome a very special guest to our open meeting to provide some brief testimony and some insight. We've got New York Attorney General Letitia James joining us through the power of modern communications because she has publicly advocated for this agency to work together with wireless carriers to expand language accessibility for severe weather alerts. We welcome her testimony, and I look forward to our continuing collaboration to better meet the needs of constituencies who need information in language to keep them out of harm's way. So the Attorney General of New York, please proceed.
Thank you so much. My camera doesn't appear to be working. I'm not sure if you can see me or not or hear me.
We can see you and you look great, so just straight
you,
away.
Thank you. Madam Chairwoman and FCC Commissioners, thank you for inviting me to join you today. And thank you for your commitment to expanding language access to wireless emergency alerts. As we know, the frequency and intensity of life-threatening storms has increased significantly and will continue to increase due to climate change. Recent examples in New York State include Hurricane Ida in the fall of 2021 and 2022 Christmas-time blizzard in Buffalo. As the Government Accountability Office has observed, wireless emergency alerts, or WEAs, such as those from the National Weather Service and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, are the best way to notify Americans of severe weather. Indeed, WEAs have saved countless lives during severe weather events and other emergencies. I am deeply concerned, therefore, that the wireless industry has not yet developed the capability to transmit WEAs in languages other than English and Spanish. In 2021, Hurricane Ida ravaged New York City and the Northeast, causing at least 90 deaths in 9 states, including 18 in New York due to flash flooding. The alerts that the National Weather Service sent to communities in New York City were only in English and Spanish. In the borough of Queens and Brooklyn, where most of the deaths occurred, 26% and 78% of households speak languages other than English or Spanish at home, according to the United States Census data. In fact, an estimated 1.3 million New Yorkers have limited proficiency in English and are also not Spanish speakers. In February of last year, I sent a letter to the National Weather Service detailing how Hurricane Ida had a disproportionate impact on Asian American immigrants, many of whom have limited English or Spanish language proficiency. In addition to that, I visited a number of family members and I visited the community impacted by Hurricane Ida. And I can tell you most of the individuals had limited English proficiency and or did not speak Spanish. This past October, I sent a letter to the FCC, as well as the president of the wireless industry group CTIA, urging that efforts to expand access to WEAs in more languages be accelerated. I appreciate the response from the chairwoman from this past February about FCC efforts to address this issue. Severe weather events increasingly put life and property at risk. Despite this, the wireless industry has not expanded its language capability for WEAs in the nearly 6 years since the FCC called on it to do so. I therefore support and applaud the FCC's proposal that would accelerate the wireless industry making WEAs available in a number of additional languages. My office stands ready to support the FCC and its partners and stakeholders in this critical work or any other work to expand our democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Attorney General James. We appreciate you joining us today, also for sharing a firsthand account of how communities in your own backyard can be better served by the updates that we are proposing here at the FCC. Thank you for bringing this issue to our attention. We got progress to make and some work to do. We look forward to working with you to make it happen. Now we'll hear comments from the bench. We'll start with Commissioner Carr.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks to the Attorney General for the remarks. I think when we look at WEA, it's clear that it's become an integral part of our emergency awareness and response. And when you step back from the details of any particular item, we have to get a couple of things right. Obviously, the system has to work. It has to be trustworthy, it has to be actionable, it has to be relevant, and it needs to be accessible. And we take on one of those sort of core issues here. And as we do so, we have to be mindful of making sure that we have the incentive structure right so that consumers don't opt out, that they feel like this is relevant information to them. They don't just simply mute it. And that carriers also have right incentives to not opt out of the system itself. And so as we go forward with this, I think there's a lot that we can do to improve this, particularly around accessibility, making sure the system continues to work for everyone. And so this item has my support.
Thank you. Commissioner Starks.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Agree. And thank you to Attorney General James for joining us and giving that valued perspective and how it's impacting the folks in New York. This has my strong support. I think there are a lot of great recommendations here and look forward to moving on. I agree that, you know, including support for messaging in additional languages, the inclusion of images and maps, all is going to be increasingly important in making sure that this reaches folks timely and gets them actionable and moving. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this item proposing various modernizations of the WEA alert system. The days when mobile handsets were only capable of displaying text alerts are long behind us, and the proposals in this item will help get the best information in the most accessible format to the public when seconds and minutes count. The possibility of automatic machine translations allowing for millions of non-English speakers in this country to access emergency alerts is especially promising, but could also present some challenges, such as the possibility of inaccurate or dangerously misleading translations. I encourage the public safety community to continue to engage with us in this proceeding so that we can address any concerns that they may have or that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. It's the worst nightmare of any parent. Your child has gone missing. I can't even imagine the horror. Nor can I imagine the waves of relief when they are found. During the last decade, wireless emergency alerts went mainstream. And as a result, more than 130 children have been rescued and saved from harm. Countless other children and adults have had their lives saved because these alerts gave them the notice they needed to find shelter in storm or evacuate in advance of deadly fire and floods. Over the last 10 years, our best estimate is that there are more than 78,000 wireless emergency alerts that have been issued in the United States. And by now, we're not just familiar with them. They have become a part of the fabric of modern life, much like the mobile phones that are always with us in our palms, pockets, and purses. But it can be easy to forget that this system of public safety alerting is still relatively new. But it's important to remember, because it's new, this system can really still improve. And that's why today we have a series of proposals to enhance the accessibility of wireless emergency alerts, and this effort starts with language. Right now, these alerts can only be sent in English. and Spanish. But I think we can do more to reach more people in more places with emergency information. In fact, I know we can. Now, a big reason for this is that New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who joined us today, brought to our attention how expanded multilingual alerting can save lives. In a letter she wrote late last year, she highlighted how during Hurricane Ida, nearly all of those who lost their lives in rising floodwaters in New York spoke languages other than English and Spanish. The wireless emergency alerts just never reached this population. She called on us to do more, and she noted how the New York City Emergency Management Department had developed an application that provides alerting in English and 13 other languages. It proves if we are creative, we can find a way to do this, and we can save more lives. Now, another reason I know we can do better is that in advance of today's rulemaking, I wrote the 9 largest providers to inquire about what can be done to have wireless emergency alerts available in more languages. Their responses inform this effort, and I'm hopeful they will speed this process. But we're not stopping there, because there are other improvements we can make. We propose a new database to increase transparency and track participation in wireless emergency alerts, along with performance information like reliability, speed, and location accuracy. And, ending where I began, we ask about sending thumbnail-sized images in alerts, noting that it would be especially helpful and effective for these cases involving missing children. In short, we can do a lot of good here. We can improve wireless emergency alerts and make this relatively new tool for public safety more powerful, more accessible, more accurate, and more effective. So let's get to it. I want to thank the staff responsible for this effort, including Nicole McGinnis, Austin Randazzo, Erica Olson, James Wiley, Shabir Hamid, Michael Antonio, David Kirshner, Tara Shostek, Haley Laws, Ahmed Lajoui, Stephen Carpenter, and David Saratsky from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, Christina Clearwater and Gannett Hanley from the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, Susie Rosen Singleton and William David Wallace from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Victoria Randazzo, Jeremy Marcus, and Ryan McDonald from the Enforcement Bureau, Shauna Wilkerson from the Office of Communications Business Opportunities, Alex Yankovich, Craig Stroop, Emily Talaga, and Cher Lee from the Office of Economics and Analytics, William Huber, Elliot Tarloff, Douglas Klein, and William Richardson from the Office of General Counsel. We will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Carr?
Approve.
Commissioner Starks?
Approve.
Commissioner Symington?
Approve.
The chair votes aye. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, please announce, well, I just realized we reached the end. And I didn't think it was going to happen. It's been long. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Before we end today, would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements at this time? Commissioner Carr? Nothing. Commissioner Starks?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Commissioner Symington?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Oh my gosh. All right, I got stuff. I want to announce a few retirements. The first is Lisa Gelb. We really would like to recognize her. She has been a long-standing public servant. She served the FCC for over 25 years, most recently as Deputy Chief and Chief of Staff of the Enforcement Bureau. She actually started in the commission way back in 1995, and at that point, she'd already logged time with a public interest organization, a law firm, and on Capitol Hill. And once she got here, she joined what was then called the Common Carrier Bureau, and she worked on what was then hot, called the computer inquiries. And then Congress passed the Telecommunications Act of 1996, and following passage of that law, she was a team leader on all kinds of local competition issues here before becoming the first chief of what is now called the Telecommunications Access Policy Division in the Wireline Competition Bureau. And then she went on to work in the General Counsel's office in the Litigation Division. She surprised a lot of people at the FCC when she left Washington, moved to San Francisco, where she worked for 3 years as a deputy city attorney on its telecom team. But you know, the siren call of this agency is strong, and she was lured back in 2004, where she was twice deputy bureau chief of the Wireline Competition Bureau, and in between those two tenures, she did a stint in the Administrative Law Division of the Office of General Counsel, all before going to the Enforcement Bureau. We want to thank Lisa Gelb for her extraordinary service, her length of service, and we wish her the best in retirement. And I've been told to also say we wish her luck with mastering pickleball. All right. She is not the only one retiring. Leah Royal, after 23 years of government service, is retiring. She began her career in New York City as an associate at law firms, but when she came to this agency, she went to the Enforcement Bureau, where she's been adjudicating and mediating formal complaint cases. Now, over the years, she's used her analytical and writing skills to draft many of the orders in some of the Market Dispute Division's most complicated cases. She's just got terrific litigation and mediation skills, and thanks to her, we've been able to resolve some very thorny disputes. The fact that Leah is one of those rare lawyers who knows how to do that quietly and effectively is something to behold. It's also worth beholding that she, unlike a lot of her peers in the legal sector, loves math. Anyway, she is going to be sorely missed. Thank her for her works. Nam Phan is retiring after 39 years at the FCC. I don't know if that's a record, but it's pretty close. Now, most of that time he spent in the Office of Engineering and Technology, and he has contributed to everything from the DTV transition to analyzing electromagnetic compatibility between different wireless systems and medical devices. So working with the Media Bureau, Nam also supported the application process for broadcast licenses with his work on RF propagation, which included working on the individual location Longley-Rice model, which was a really big part of making adjustments associated with congressional duties under the Satellite Home Viewer Improvement Act. He also became a Unix and software guru early on in his career at the agency, and that knowledge helped support the creation of a TV study, and he has shared that with his colleagues in the Office of Engineering and Technology, and in his nearly 4 decades of service, we really thank him for all of that. All right, and with respect more to people who are still here, we're going to talk about how we have liftoff. Julie Kearney is now the chief of the Space Bureau, and I appreciate my colleagues for their work to make that happen. I also appreciate a lot of others in this agency who were able to stand up a bureau in record time. And also, we have Ethan Lucarelli, who's serving as the inaugural chief of the Office of International Affairs. I want to thank Tom Sullivan for his long-standing and extraordinary work as the head of the International Bureau. And I also want to acknowledge with Ethan's departure, that leaves an opening in my office. I want to thank him for his counsel, his dedication, his service. And I also want to acknowledge that on an acting basis, we are going to welcome Jonathan Campbell to my team to cover wireless, Space Bureau, and international issues. He is presently Auctions Division Chief of the Office of Economics and Analytics and knows these issues well. Craig Bomberg is going to be serving as Acting Division Chief in the Office of Economics and Analytics in the role that Jonathan Campbell has previously served. All right, but the announcements, they don't stop there. I also want to formally confirm a few other additional leadership positions. First, I want to make clear that Joel Tabenblatt is our permanent chief of the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. He is a fixture in these halls, and he knows these issues well. He's also been acting chief since January of 2021. I also want to highlight that Ron Rapazzi is going to serve as chief of the Office of Engineering and Technology, where he has been acting chief since February of 2020. Finally, Dewana Terry will officially become the permanent director of the Office of Workplace Diversity. She's been the acting director since January 2020. She is also a special advisor to me in my office and one of the members of our task force to prevent digital discrimination and an all-around powerhouse. So thank you, Joel, Ron, and Dewana. They've been exemplary in their acting capabilities, but I'm really pleased to confirm them to these permanent roles. Thank them for their service. And with that, Madam Secretary, we are reaching the end, this time for real. Will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, May 18th, 2023.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Good afternoon, everyone. If we could please take outside conversations to the hallway, please. We're going to get started with the chairwoman's post-open meeting press conference. For folks who are having conversations not related to the press conference, if you could just please take those to the hallway, we greatly appreciate it. All right, and thanks so much. Members of the press are obviously welcome to the front table. It's usually the easiest spot to get situated in. And with that, I will get us started. Hi, I'm Paloma Perez, the press secretary for the Federal Communications Commission. And just for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, we will have this press conference with about allotting one question per reporter. If you could please identify yourself, that would be very helpful for those of us on the Office of Media Relations team. And with that, I will turn it over to Chairwoman Rosenworcel, who will take a few questions from the press.
Thank you so much, Paloma. We can start. Go ahead. Oh, but Todd, you're sitting right there. All right. All right. Go ahead.
Hi, Madam Chair. Chris Cole with Law 360. I wanted to ask about the RIP and Replace program because there have been so many issues concerning replenishing the fund. I was wondering how that's going in terms of talks on the Hill about that. Can you characterize the status of that?
It's vitally important that we take insecure equipment out of our nation's networks, and we continue to work with Congress to make sure we have the funds to support the carriers that need to do so. That's an ongoing process. We'll keep you updated. Thank you.
Chairwoman, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Great. Roland Martin, Black Star Network. Question for you in terms of the Standard General Tegna deal. Why wouldn't the commission openly discuss it and then do an up and vote down? You got a couple of commissioners who said they would like to do that. Why not do that? That way it's clearly resolved.
Well, as you may know, this is presently the subject of litigation and an administrative proceeding, so I'm unable to talk about it at this time.
But it went to, but the question is, you can make the decision though to bring it before the full commission, correct?
Like I said, it's presently before an administrative proceeding, an administrative rulemaking and litigation, so I can't talk about it at this time, but I could certainly help by making sure that our Bureau folks follow up with you so you're familiar with the rules.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Barrington Simon, Black Press USA. I'm wondering, given the focus of this administration on diversity, how does that jibe with what's going on with Standard General and Tegna?
Well, I think as I just mentioned to Mr. Martin, I can't speak about this transaction. It is presently in litigation, and we have an administrative proceeding, so it prevents me from talking about it at this time. But I firmly believe that the diversity of our nation's media needs to reflect the full diversity of this country.
Do you have a sense of how long it will take the administrative procedure?
Don't have an answer for you on that.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you. Oh, Todd, this is your last shining moment. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And with that, I'm going to call up my colleague, Katie Gorsak, who will be leading the Bureau press conference.
Adjust down here. Welcome to today's Bureau Presser. We'll be taking questions on today's meeting items in the order in which they were presented. So we're going to start off with the promoting efficient use of spectrum and opportunities for new services in the Office of Engineering and Technology. Are there any questions for the OET item? Going once? Oh, Christopher? Okay, great. Could OET please come up?
It's just one.
One is great.
Afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I was just wondering if there were changes from the draft that's been published.
Well, yes, there were conforming technical edits that were made, and there's a reflection of an ex parte presentation that was made, but non-substantive.
Nothing substance?
No, nothing in substance has changed since the public release of the draft.
Oh.
All right?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the review of international Section 214 authorizations from the Office of International Affairs. Are there any questions on this item? Okay. Next, we'll move on to the satellite broadband competition from our new Space Bureau. Are there any questions on that item? Okay. Next, we will move on to the Wireline Competition Bureau item related to access arbitrage. Are there any questions on that item? Okay. And lastly, we'll move on to the wireless emergency alerts from our Public Safety Bureau. Are there any questions on that item? Well, at this time, this concludes our Bureau press conference. I believe Commissioner Carr may be available after this for some questions, and I will step away. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much. Good to join all you. Happy to take some questions. I think this is my last press conference. There's been some additional developments on a number of important issues. I talked a little bit here about FCC Spectrum Auction Authority and the value of that. I gave some remarks after the recent TikTok CEO hearing, but I'm happy to open it up more broadly. So we go right here.
Hi, Commissioner. The Montana TikTok ban, do you see that as a national model? And are there any obstacles to implementation there that could present the same problems at a national level?
Yeah, Montana could be a good path forward. I've sort of said for a while that I really don't see a path forward for TikTok in this country other than a ban. The idea of some sort of effort that would result in a genuine divestment of interest back into China is an interesting idea. It's one that, according to press reports, the Biden administration has floated, either divest or face a possible ban. I think one of the issues there is the information coming out of the Foreign Ministry of China indicates that they, notwithstanding TikTok's claims to be very much independent from the CCP, they wouldn't approve of a divestment type of approach that may ultimately take you back to a ban. But I think that is ultimately the right approach for the country as a matter of national security. I think it's one that has a lot and continues to grow bipartisan support, not just in the U.S. Last night I testified remotely before the Australian Senate. They have a select committee that's looking at a lot of these types of issues. So I think we can, I think that's the right path forward.
Commissioner Carr, quick question for you. If the chair has authority to recommend to send the Standard General Techna merger to an administrative judge, doesn't the chair have the same authority to simply say, I can reverse my decision and bring it before the full commission?
That's my understanding, is that a chair would have the ability to bring a vote. And my position has been sort of crystal clear from not just day one, but from minute one when we learned that the Bureau was issuing a hearing designation order on this. I put out a public statement saying that I believed that these applicants deserved an up or down vote from the commission. It was a nearly year-long review process, longer than our 180-day shot clock that we attempt to meet with these things. And for me, the framing here is more broad. If you step back and you look across this country and you can see local newspapers shuttering by the dozen, just news while we're sitting here at the dais this morning of another news entity that's closing down. And we need to create incentives in this country so that there is capital flowing into news gathering, supporting local journalists. In my perspective, it's sort of a break glass moment for broadcasters. And whatever sort of rule or regulation is standing in the way, we need to, and in fact, we're supposed to be doing it by law, looking at removing it. So I think we need to be very cognizant as a commission of sending signals to people that we want investment in local news.
Now, I've covered city government, county government, so a lot of people don't understand the minutia of this. So if 2 or 3 commissioners want something placed on the agenda, how does that work? Or is it completely the authority of the chair to determine what comes before the commission?
Yeah, the prerogative of the chair is to decide what the commissioners vote on. That is one of the powers of sort of the CEO roles of the chair. And so even if you have votes of more than 1 or 2 or even 3 commissioners that want a particular outcome, it ultimately putting the particulars of this proceeding to decide. As a general matter, it's up to the chair to decide the agenda and put items before us to vote or to take items away.
And have you asked the chair to bring this before the commission?
My statement on this has been limited to my public statement, which was that my position is that I believe that after this lengthy review that we should give a commission level up or down vote on this one.
So that was the public statement. You never met with her personally or directly to ask her to bring before the full commission?
I'll have to think about it. I think my statements have been limited to public at this point. Again, as the chair sort of indicated, there's various processes in place at this point in terms of the HDO. But I've made my point clear in a statement, and I think I've had that views be conveyed to my colleagues as well.
Okay.
Mr. Commissioner, thanks for talking to us. I'm wondering, would the commission be able to reverse the administrative law review?
Would the full commission in appropriate circumstances have authority to reverse a bureau level HDO? Yes, as a general matter, the commission can reverse effectively any bureau level decision is ultimately reviewable by the full commission.
And would that require the majority of the commission, or would just like 3 or 4 of you be able to do that?
Again, any action that the full commission would take would have to be something presented to the commissioners for a vote by the chair. There's no mechanism in FCC rules for non-chair commissioners, no matter how many of them that are in support of a particular position, to force a vote on anything.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? Trent, nothing? Okay, thanks all.